welcome back to another week, another Sinister. It's me, your favorite Hot Topic employee, BOZE. This week's case is so interesting because the story itself was shocking, but also the method in which they were killed was something I've heard before, but I had never heard of it happening outside of a jail. Now, I want to give you a mini disclaimer. This story might feel like it has some elements of justice for some people. But on the other hand, when I really looked at it all big picture, I'm not sure there was really any justice here. But I want to tell you the story and I want to walk with you through it. And I'm so curious what you guys think. Now, before we hop into this episode about Corinna Baines, you will know on Sinister, I usually tend to do like small town cases or lesser known cases where there's enough information in the court documents for us to piece together everything that happened, even though they're not huge media cases. Those are just ones that I prefer to do. However, there are some really, really, really big cases that I'm pretty well versed in, but I would actually love to do a Sinister on them so we can find all of those extra invisible parts that we've been missing, even on these big cases, because that's what I like to do here. Now, one of those big ones coming up will be Jodi Arias. You know how I feel about that. We're doing Jodi. We're going really deep on Jodi. It might be a much longer episode, but I was thinking I would actually like to do a couple of those really big cases for a few weeks. So I'm curious to hear from you guys any of those really, really, really big cases that we've all heard of before, but me and the Sinister team are going to go in there and try to find all the little bits and pieces from whether it be their childhood or the timeline of events that we might have missed. So feel free to leave a comment, leave a suggestion in the Discord, whatever it may be, and let us know what those really, really big cases are that you want to dig into. Corinna Smith-Baines was originally Camilla Smith, and she was born in 1962 in England. By the time Corinna was 21 years old, she had already been previously married and had 2 children from that marriage. Now, this is also interesting because it's, the 80s in England, and she's so young and she already has 2 kids. But she ends up meeting this guy named Michael. And Michael's an older guy. He's about 20 years her senior, and he likes Corinna, he's interested in her, and he's not bothered at all that she has kids. This is actually a pretty big deal because even now, like when you're in your 20s or 30s, if you have kids, like some people will be like, no, I don't want to take on somebody else's kids. Like I want like a new family. And it's tough, especially when, we as women think like, okay, I'm in love with this person. I'm going to have children with them. And then it all blows up, but you still love your kids. You're still going to take care of them. But it is hard to date. Now, what I find interesting is this was almost 50 years ago in the 1980s where people were even more like, oh no, like if you have kids, like you got to figure that out. I'm going this way. But Michael was an older guy. He understood what Corinna was going through. He didn't mind that she had children. He actually had a kid of his own already. And he said, let's do this. This also probably had to have been such a relief for Corinna. Like, here's this much older guy that's willing to take care of me, take care of my kids. I'm a single mom. He wants to love me, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care. So Corinna has got her 2 little babies. She's got a boy and a girl. And then Michael has his kid, who is a bit older. He was older too. And they all start a family together. They were in a town called Neston in England. And it seemed like they were a pretty normal, happy family. Now, I'm going to jump in here and make a little bit of an assumption because I dug through as much as I could about this because I need the history. I need to know more. And personally, I believe that Corinna was not that floored by Michael. I feel like she felt like she was not going to find another person that accepted she had 2 kids. And he was nice to her. He was able to provide. Her top priority at the moment as a single mother was to make sure her kids had a nice life. And here he is. And he seems nice enough. But it just doesn't seem to me like Corinna was really like, oh my God, like heart beating out of my chest, tongue out of my mouth. Like this guy is the fucking guy of my dreams. It just doesn't feel that way. And a lot of other people said that their marriage seemed normal to unimpressive. They were just there. Finding the right doctor is so important. Like somebody that actually cares about you, takes your concerns seriously, listens to you, and has the solutions. In my opinion, the reason why it's so hard to find the right doctor is because it's a long process. Looking through your insurance company for who takes your insurance, like how many stars do they have? How far away are they? No. Listen. All of that is available to you on ZocDoc and much quicker. Because look, you guys know how it is. Once you finally find a doctor and you get the appointment, even if it's not the right fit, you're like, okay, well, it took me a lot to even get in the door here. I'm just going to stick with it. In order to find the right doctor, you got to make the process easy. And that's exactly what ZocDoc does. ZocDoc is a free app and website, however you want to use it, that helps you find top-rated doctors in your area. I'm talking about in-network appointments. Sometimes, depending on what city you're in, you could get a same day, next day, or an appointment within 3 days. I'm telling you, ZocDoc is my favorite. From the ease of use to the accessibility, and if you guys have been watching for a while, you know I literally use this thing all the time. I found a new dermatologist through ZocDoc. I found my regular day-to-day doctor through ZocDoc. Yeah, and I kept trying things until I found the right people. I cannot express enough how much of a relief it is when you are working with doctors that actually have time for you and actually listen to whatever's going on and try to help you fix it. Like, we exist and live in our bodies every day, and you deserve to be healthy. And listen, sometimes we need a little help. So if you want to try ZocDoc out and get started on the process of finding the right doctor for you, you can go to their website, ZocDoc.com, or download the app in the store. But, like I told you, ZocDoc is free. So if you want to help us out, let them know where you came from. Go to ZocDoc.com/sinister. That's ZocDoc.com/sinister. And you can sign up for free. You can download the app for free, but let them know that we sent you. So they continued to do what families do, and they had another kid. And this time it was Michael and Corinna's child. So Corinna's got her 2 kids. They have a child together, and then Michael also has a son. Now, people in the area like to recall that they were a normal married couple, but a source pretty close to them actually was a little more vocal, and they said, well, sometimes Michael would display some extremely controlling behavior, and Corinna would just kind of take it with a grain of salt. Like, oh, okay, he's a man, he's freaking out, let him cool down, let him have whatever he wants. And anytime there were these red flags, Corinna would talk to people about it, and that's why this source actually kind of knew some details about it, but they wouldn't do anything. They would kind of just normalize it, essentially. And I believe that's probably also why people in the town said that their relationship was normal, because they all have messed up relationships. So they're like, yeah, this is no more messed up than mine, so it's normal. Comparing your situation to somebody who's also in a bad situation will really just keep you in a bad situation. But of course, Corinna turns a blind eye to any of his controlling tendencies, and she's like, look, we're married, we have a family, this is our life, let's just keep it going. Do you know anybody like that? Like, maybe it's a mother, maybe it's your aunt, maybe it's somebody that there's clearly something not good going on, but they choose to tolerate it in order to survive. And I find that that's a theme sometimes. If there's somebody evil in your life, but they're either close to you, important to you, or you need them, even if you realize that they're evil, your brain will trick you and say, don't look at those things because we cannot handle it right now if this person wasn't there. So we're going to choose to believe that they are who they say they are, and we're going to choose to believe that they are kind, despite these blaring red flags. Sometimes your brain will ignore the red flags almost out of survival if this person is important or deeply ingrained to you. Now, I know I'm being vague about these controlling things, but I do want to say there was something else that Corinna kind of noticed that was odd, but she really couldn't prove it and didn't fully understand it, so she just kept ignoring it. Now, this is fine for people in the neighborhood, or I guess this is fine for the couple, but let me ask you this. When parents ignore the arguments and the red flags and everything that they're shooting back and forth with each other, who suffers? The children. So, as you know, there are 4 children in the home that are growing up under Corinna and Michael's parenting. Now, fast forward about 30 years. 30 years of the kids growing up with this extremely avoidant behavior from the mother and this really controlling behavior from the dad. This also means to me that Corinna is not correcting the way that Michael treats the kids. If Michael does something mean to the children or mean to her, she just ignores it. This is just really bad in the home. I'm sure a lot of you guys have had issues before where like one parent or a sibling does something and then the other parent fosters this environment of, oh, just brush it off. Oh, just ignore it. God, that part goes so deep, but if you've been in this situation, you get it. And if you're understanding it, you feel it, right? So this goes on for 30 years, this just like weirdness. And Craig, Corinna's son, ends up getting into trouble when he's in his 20s. He's got some anger, he's got some violent tendencies, and he ends up in jail for assault. This was not his first time assaulting somebody. This was just the first time that he went to jail for it. Not to mention, it was a very, very serious assault. I think that this should have raised alarm bells to anyone or everyone that Craig was hurting and had some very, very serious anger inside of him. But instead, as they usually do, they just brush it off and, oh, that's Craig. He's a man. He's angry. Well, they turned a blind eye to that. And then in 2007, something else happens. Craig, after weeks of severe depression, severe distress, a lot of just not wanting to be here, he ultimately ended up taking his life. And what really bothers me about this is, let me tell you what the family said. And for some of you guys, this is going to be really triggering because you're going to know exactly what's going on. But then afterwards, I'll try to explain to the best of my ability how I perceive it. Corinna, the mother, when she was asked about this, she said that this was extremely sudden to her and the family didn't understand why. I want to be super clear because this is a sensitive topic and it's about Craig essentially taking his life and not wanting to be here anymore. To me, I feel as though Craig's pain and what he went through was invalidated his entire life, and we'll get to that more here soon. And then even when he couldn't take it anymore and he didn't want to be here and he took his own life, even still, his family, those closest to him, said, well, why did that happen? He seemed so happy. What was going on with him? I see that quite often. That one is really heavy. Maybe some of you guys in the comments have more expansive thoughts around it. But for Corinna to say that this was extremely sudden and she had no idea that Craig was struggling or he was upset or why he would do this is just really, oh, so you ignore every flag. I also just want to say, I did actually not originally go into this story thinking I was going to like point a lot of fingers at Corinna. I mean, there's a big finger to point here soon, but just as I'm going through this, Corinna's avoidance and inability to tackle difficult issues and have difficult conversations was a plague that spread to all of her children. And to me, she is responsible for that because her fear was being uncomfortable. Now, if that doesn't make you look at Corinna with a bit of a side eye here, get this part. Right before Craig passed, he told his mother something. He looked at her one day and he said to her, Mom, he's a pedophile. And Corinna immediately went to, well, I'm not going to ask any more questions about that. She did not ask him any further questions. She did not inquire further to Craig, who is the pedophile? What are you talking about? Why are you crying? What's going on? She didn't ask any further questions. And then she went on to tell people that the guy that Craig assaulted was the pedophile. So even though Craig is saying something very serious, she literally just attributes it to whoever fits the most for her at the time while not asking Craig anything further. And once again, I believe this is because it made Corinna uncomfortable. She cannot handle a difficult conversation. She cannot handle the stress of it. And so, wow, sounds very serious. I don't want to hear about that. Bye. Bro, that's Corinna, okay? That's Corinna. Damn, bro, a lot of times, usually when I do these stories, like in the beginning, like I'm feeling bad for what this person went through or something. But this time I'm a little, I'm not loving this. I'm not loving this. Craig straight up said, Mom, he's a pedophile while like crying his eyes out. And Corinna was like, okay, like, I can't believe it. Also, this is another thing that came from Corinna. She says that after that conversation, she brushed it off because Craig seemed happy the next day. Oh, I'm trying so hard to get through this. Okay, so she didn't ask any further questions on it. She claimed that she just let the issue, quote, die. Shortly after Craig tells his mother this, he takes his own life and he was no longer here after 2007. And Corinna never asked any further questions. Who is the pedophile? Well, that conversation came up again in July of 2020. Reminding you of this once more. Craig passed in 2007, and the next part that I'm about to tell you that's connected to it happened in July of 2020, 13 years later. So on July 13th, 2020, which many of you guys know, this was around the time of the pandemic. A lot of us, I believe at the time, were quarantining, or at the very least, the COVID protocols in the United States were very, very heavy. So it was kind of difficult to go and see people. But on this particular day, Corinna had gone to visit her daughter. Corinna was having such a nice time with her daughter. She ends up calling Michael and is like, hey, I'm actually going to stay a little bit longer. It's really nice seeing her. And for some reason, Michael did not want her to stay with her daughter. He just was like, no, like, you should just come back. You should just come back. He just acted very not pleased. When Corinna tells her daughter that, sorry, can't stay, gotta get back to Michael, this really triggers her daughter. And finally, she says something. She tells her mom, quote, ask him what he did or I will tell you. Knowing how Corinna responds to confrontation like that, she probably just froze. I feel like there's a world where Corinna knew on the other side that Michael was a total piece of shit, but she just didn't want to have that conversation because she would have to take some type of ownership that she married a piece of shit or something like that, when that's not entirely the case. Like, if you don't know, you don't know. But when people start to tell you, especially your children, might be a good time to listen and to develop that skill of being able to listen to difficult conversations. So it's very difficult, and her daughter doesn't give a whole lot of information at first. She's kind of trying to get it out, and she's saying it in a roundabout way. And then eventually she just breaks down and she says it. She tells her mom that Michael had been abusing her and Craig since they were both little kids. You guys remember in the beginning when Corinna was really young and Michael married her and he said, oh, you have 2 little kids? No problem. Bring them on over to my house. I personally believe that he targeted the children before he even married Corinna. And I do not believe that she knew this initially. I don't know when or at what point she saw signs. It's hard for me to give a lot of leniency to Corinna here because, especially if you've been watching true crime things for a while, you know we have seen so many cases where mothers are with the most abusive guy ever. Like, so far, Michael is controlling and a huge fucking creep, but there's no like history of extreme domestic control. I'm saying that specifically because I have seen cases with even stronger things, like the Saeed sisters, and still the mother makes some kind of effort to get the children out, like no matter how terrifying it is, or at least they believe the kids. In the very least, they believe the children. Across the board, Corinna seemed to turn a blind eye to Michael's creepy behavior, seemed to turn a blind eye to the signs of sexual abuse within the children, seemed to turn a blind eye when they cried around Michael or didn't want to be around him. Like, I personally believe that there was a part of Corinna that just didn't want to face it, but at some point, I believe that she knew. Another thing that makes me believe it was difficult for the survivors to talk to Corinna about this was because, one, it took her daughter 13 years after Craig died for her to even say what happened. I believe this is because Corinna and Michael had cultivated an environment where the children believed that they would never be believed. The fact that it took them so long, the fact that Craig almost said it to his mom. They did not trust that their mother was going to believe them or do anything. So there was some type of environment in the home where these children were, They were abused. They were manipulated. They were essentially mocked, because that's what pedophiles do. They mock you that I'm doing the worst thing ever to you and nobody will help you. That type of taunting in your own home and violation is wild. And then their mother, nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. But something is changing. This conversation finally struck a chord with Corinna. And this time, she not only chose to believe her daughter, but she decided she was going to do something about it. This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform for website builders to stand out and succeed in their business. Squarespace is an all-in-one website that will help you build the best homepage and expand your business. You would think a website builder is just about the aesthetics or helping you so you don't have to learn all the coding. No. Squarespace actually does so much more than that. Now, if you are worried about the design, don't worry. They have hundreds of different templates for you to pick from, and it's actually amazing how easy it is to just change the color or change the font and launch your website that day. But if you want to get a little more intricate, you can use their SEO tools to help your website rank higher in the search history. Listen, what's the point of building a website if people can't find you? You need those SEO tools, especially if you're selling something, which, by the way, Squarespace also has a shop feature. You can build a shop, a whole online store within the Squarespace builder. All you have to do is create the content or the work, the art, whatever it may be, and start selling. And if you're an analytics person, they have one of the best analytics interfaces I feel like I've seen. I mean, you can see where exactly all of your traffic is coming from, more opportunities, how many page views, everything. So if you're somebody that soaks all of that up, make sure you use those tools. Now, if you are looking to sign up and start your business today, all you got to do is go to squarespace.com/sinister. You can get 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain. And all you got to do is put Sinister in when you go to checkout or type in squarespace.com/sinister. Hey, at least check it out if you're interested in building a website. Up until this point, I've been very critical of Corinna. But now, even though it's been 30 years, it seems like she wants to do something. She wants to find some justice. And finally, she wants to believe her daughter. Corinna's first reaction is to call the police immediately. But her daughter interferes and says, "Mom, please don't do that. Not yet. I don't want to divide the family, and I want to have some kind of proof." So Corinna's daughter said that she wanted to take a polygraph test, and they should also bring in Michael to take the polygraph test. Now, polygraphs are really kind of pseudoscience. I even heard that the guy that invented it was like, this is not accurate. But, you know, a lot of people have heard of lie detector tests before, and they believed this was something. They had absolutely nothing, and a family that likes to just ignore red flags and say, oh, that doesn't happen. Let's wait till they calm down the next day. So I completely understand. They needed something. And also the determination that Corinna and her daughter had to set up this polygraph test was so real that they booked it. They pre-booked and paid $674 for a mutual polygraph test. They were going to bring Corinna's daughter in and then Michael as well. Also, as a note, Corinna's daughter preferred to be unnamed in anything about this, so that's why we're leaving her name out of it. So I'm going to do something that I have never really done before in a Sinister case, and this might be a bit difficult, especially for people that resonate with her kids and were not believed or felt like nobody would understand them or people would question them if they tried to speak up. At this point, I'm actually going to ask you to kind of put your empathy cap on for Corinna, because suddenly the door is open. And what I mean by that is for 40, 50 years, Corinna has probably been noticing these patterns about her husband. But remember I said in the beginning that sometimes when we are heavily tied to someone, and I know you guys are like, oh, she's married, she could leave. You're heavily tied to your husband or your partner, or whether it's a parent or whether a sibling or something like that, right? When we are heavily tied to people and we can't face the reality of what they are, the brain is just like, nope, 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 nope. But when that door finally opens, there is so much anger, rage, like deceit, It just, oh my God. I mean, what I'm trying to say is she was noticing things, but bottling up all of these emotions because she didn't have the skills to handle it. And then she'd wake up the next day and be like, oh, okay, it's gone now. Nobody's talking about it. I feel better, whatever. But now that has come off. Every single doubt, fear, little piece of anger, anything, it is all about to come pouring out of Corinna. Now, whether you want to put your empathy cap on for this or your nuance cap or your observation cap, whatever, but what I'm telling you is we're shifting a little bit because Corinna is now essentially a different person. For the first time in her life, after not confronting things ever, she's going to make some type of confrontation. So just to give you a little more information, when they got married, Corinna was 21 and Michael was in his 40s. So now Corinna is in her 50s and Michael is 81. Corinna was also his stay-at-home caretaker. So he couldn't do much. He's super, super old. And, there's a part of me that was wondering if the kids were waiting for him to pass away before they felt safe enough to speak up. So Corinna gets home that night and Michael's in bed watching his shows, doing whatever he does as an old man. And behind the scenes, an avalanche is coming. And there's an avalanche of emotion and outpour that is coming from Corinna. And she starts off by making just a flurry of calls. She is just rambling, upset. Like, this is a woman that doesn't know how to deal with confrontation or anger. And not only is she about to really deal with it for the first time, but it is the worst thing that has happened to her and probably could happen to a wife and mother of 30 years. Like, I have to put it into perspective for you. Corinna was taken advantage of by a creepy old man in her 20s under the guise of, let me take care of you and your children. That man then began to molest her children to the point that one of them is no longer here. And the last one is absolutely broken and begging for anyone to believe them. That is the way her children lived for 30 years. I really, truly feel for Corinna as a mother at this point. I do understand, because you guys heard my commentary all through the beginning. Corinna fucked up. I personally feel like Corinna fucked up. But now there's something in her that has activated. And my God, do I wish it had activated 30 years prior. However, here we are. So around 9:30, she starts making all these calls. And Michael doesn't know. He doesn't hear the context of the conversation. That fool's probably in and out of sleep. And she's just having a full-on breakdown. A little bit after midnight, she finally gets off of her last call. For 3 hours, she's been going and going, her mind swirling, trying to talk to people about something, anything. And it's just coming out all weird because all of her emotions are just scrambled up. And she goes out into the garden, her yard or whatever, and she grabs a bucket and she fills that bucket up with water and she boils it. And while the water is boiling, she begins to add sugar. Cups and cups and cups of sugar. Boiling sugar can actually be pretty dangerous. What happens is that the water can really only heat up to a certain temperature, but when you add in sugar, well, now that mixture can get up to 300 degrees. When you boil sugar water like this, the water begins to evaporate and it kind of turns into this thick syrup that is extremely hot. Those sugar crystals that are still in there are extremely hot and they can stick to anything. She gets this mixture as hot as it can possibly be. And she's just in this almost disassociated state, like stirring it, heating it up, and it's getting hotter and hotter. And she picks up that bucket and she goes into the room where Michael is laying down and she dumps this hot sugar water all over his arms, all over his torso, just all over the upper half of his body. And remember when I said that sticky substance, those crystals, it adheres to the skin, just burning right through. And Michael wakes up screaming in pain. It's just raw, hot, 300-degree syrup all over the top of his body. His skin starts to boil. He probably doesn't even know what's happening. He has just been awoken from a sleep And after Corinna does it, she runs out the door and she runs down like 9 doors down to a neighbor's house. Some people in the police report were like, well, why did you run so far? Well, maybe her only friend was a couple houses down, not really sure, but she goes 9 doors down, banging on the door. And the neighbor answers and she tells them, I've hurt him. I've hurt him. And the neighbor calls 911. Excuse me, the neighbor called 999. Corinna stayed at the neighbor's house until the police arrived, but when they got there, they found Michael still alive, just moaning in pain, completely alone, with 36% of his body burned. Michael gets taken in to the hospital, and obviously, the police begin their investigation. At first, when they talk to Corinna, she gives a couple of different stories and they don't really add up. This is all the same day, so it kind of tacks onto that frazzled emotion she was feeling after 9 p.m. calling everybody and just everything unlocked. And I want to remind you guys, when I was saying, put on your empathy cap or your observation cap or your nuance cap, whichever one you want to put on, what I was asking for you there is just to understand that almost character-wise, Corinna has shifted from just this absent mother to, holy fuck, I need to be a mother. Really understanding what was done to your children, what your role in it was, how you didn't prevent it or help them or anything. I gotta say, man, that is hard. That is really hard. To feel like you may have failed your children and not realizing it until this amount of damage was done. On one hand, Corinna, what the fuck? On the other hand, she is going through it. So whatever cap you want to wear there, maybe it's your nuance cap, go for it. So another thing that I thought was really interesting was during the investigation, when she really kind of told the truth, she still didn't fully say that he had been molesting my kids. She actually said to the police that she, quote, lost control and killed him. I just think this is really interesting because, sure, did she lose control and kill him? Yes. But she's really putting all the blame on herself and not mentioning what Michael did at all, which makes me feel like Corinna may have had a pattern of trying to protect Michael her whole life and just blame herself, protect him from anything. And that tendency to protect Michael no matter what may be exactly why she didn't listen to her children. So she says that, but initially this was just an investigation into why she did that. But ultimately, after 5 weeks in care, Michael passes away from his injuries. So Corinna has now been charged with murder and she goes to trial at the Chester Crown Court. This is where all of the details really start to come out, not just, Corinna having a breakdown in the interrogation room and not wanting to throw Michael into the bus and not wanting to say what happened and da-da-da-da. This is the actual discovery where it's timeline of events. Here is what happened as they presented it to the jury. So this is where that piece of information came out, where they actually had the receipt that they paid a $624 advance fee. Sorry, I think I said $674 earlier. A $624 advance fee booked for the polygraph test. This booking was made at 8 p.m. that night. So if you recall, her daughter told her sometime earlier in the day, by 8 p.m., they had talked about it and had that polygraph booked. They meant business. And by 9:30, Corinna had to go home and she was making all those calls. This was, man, a lot happened this day. Now, this is when we find out a little bit more about what happened that night and also into the character of the family. That night when Corinna was making all those calls, one of the calls was made to her son. It was the son that she and Michael shared. He was much younger. In a panic, Corinna told her son what her daughter said had happened. And Corinna's son, who is also Michael's son, responded and he said, I don't believe her. Dad wouldn't do that. She's a liar. That didn't happen. So then Corinna goes and calls her daughter and says, I just talked to so-and-so, the son, and he said he didn't believe it. This bothers me so much because Corinna fully believed her daughter, and then she goes and talks to one person that maybe that didn't happen to. It was Michael's biological son. The other two were not his biological children. And now her other son has said this, and now Corinna is questioning her daughter. This is exactly what her daughter was afraid of. And so it hurts her to hear her mother believe her so furiously, and then now one person has said one thing and now her mom's doubting it again. It's like, oh, I cannot imagine how devastating that is. So her daughter says, Mom, please do not talk to anybody else. I'm really upset that you even talked to my brother about this, not her biological brother. It's like her half brother. Well, it is her biological. It's her half brother. She's like, I'm really upset that you even talked to him about this. Please just walk with me here, do this with me, and just let me take the test with him so we have something. And so Corinna's like, okay. She's like, do not talk to anybody else until we have the polygraph results. And Corinna says, okay.
Hey listeners, this is Toni Collette, and I'm excited to introduce my new audio fiction series, Madame Ram. It tells the incredible dramatised true story of Georgia Frontier, a former showgirl who inherited the LA Rams after her husband's death and shook the NFL. Using astrology to guide her decisions, she became one of the most controversial and influential figures in modern sports. Follow Madame Ram on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.
So then Corinna gets off the phone and she's still feeling it. I mean, I really hope that I've been able to paint a picture of how serious this day was for Corinna. And then she makes another call to her cousin. And I'm not sure what was said on that call. The cousin did not testify. Corinna did not really give an accurate version of what happened on that call because that's the last call that was made before she killed Michael. So I'm not sure if this cousin validated everything that Corinna and her daughter were thinking and said, I've felt like Michael was a creep for a long time, or if this person also denied it. I'm not sure. But right after that call was made, Corinna went into the garden and she filled up that bucket with water. Shortly after, in July of 2021, Corinna Baines was found guilty of murder. When the judge spoke at the sentencing, he said that he felt that by Corinna murdering her husband, she took away the opportunity for him to have a fair trial. And also she took away an opportunity for her daughter's allegations to not only be heard, but possibly proven in court, whether it was through a behavioral pattern or whether there was something else or other witnesses. Who knows? But the judge felt like Corinna did not bring justice here. She just took matters into her own hands. The detective that was involved in this case, it was a guy named Detective Paul Hughes. He said that the way that Corinna killed Michael was extremely cruel. To throw boiling water over someone when they are asleep is absolutely horrific. To also mix 3 bags of sugar with the water showed the determination she had to cause serious harm. The sugar placed into the water made it viscous. It becomes thicker and stickier, and it sticks to the skin better. If you didn't know, killing somebody with sugar water is something that sometimes happens in prisons. It's not easy to get access to weapons or something that can be used to murder. These things are contraband, and some inmates can get away with it. There's a lot of creative things in jail, but, if you have a tool that could be used to kill somebody and they find it, they're going to take it away. So inmates have to be a little more creative. I want to take a second to pivot you to another case just for a minute, just to give you a little more reference of where I had heard of this recently. There was a case over a decade ago where this young woman named Melanie McNamara was killed. She was in a car with some other people, and these guys in a gang or something drove up and they meant to kill somebody else in the car, but the bullet hit Melanie and she died. That guy's name is Keith Hall, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for this murder. I think Melanie McNamara must have had some kind of ties to somebody that was connected in the prison or outside of it, because according to some sources, there was a $10,000 bounty on anyone that could hurt Keith Hall significantly while he was in jail. So one day he was in his cell and he got stabbed multiple times by multiple inmates, but he survived. And then afterwards, another attack happened. One of the prisoners went into the kitchen and they boiled water with sugar and made that same sugar water concoction. And the inmates went in there and they held Keith Hall down and they poured the 300-degree hot sugar water down Keith's throat. This was intended to kill him because that hot, sticky liquid, just like it stuck to Michael's skin, it was supposed to stick all down his throat on all of his organs and just burn everything on the way down, which would most likely kill somebody. However, Keith survived again, but their intent was fully to kill him using the sugar water, just destroying his internal organs. I don't know what's worse, dying that way or surviving that, but that is what happened to Keith Hall. So that's Keith. Back to our current case, Corinna. This is something that investigators have seen before, but in prisons. So the fact that she did this to Michael in that way, I thought was really interesting, but the detectives said this was particularly cruel, which I'm telling you that because it plays a factor into her sentencing. Now, generally, we're in England, so Corinna would get the whole book thrown at her. The sentence is usually mandatory life for some kind of first-degree murder like this. It's intentional. But the judge said that this required a little bit of balancing. He seemed to believe the daughter's accusations. He believed that that also happened to Craig. And, you know, I really think that the daughter's fear to come forward with the allegations until she had something that she could hold on to that would be difficult for her family to say, oh, she made this up. That is really powerful to me. I understand that he did not get a full trial for this. And I also understand that, you know, I'm the host of the show and I have a public platform and I need to stay neutral. And, you know, everyone's got this right to a fair trial. I mean, they absolutely do. And I also do wish there was an opportunity for Corinna's daughter to possibly feel vindicated and to have the whole book thrown at him. But all of that to say, I believe those kids. I really believe those kids. I mean, Craig is no longer here, and Corinna's daughter really wanted to do it as right as she could, and they waited so long. That's my take. And so I do agree with the balancing of her sentence because this is almost getting into crime of passion territory, right? Like crime of passion doesn't have to be, I loved you so much. It's this. It's, oh my God, this is so intense. This is so much. Here we are, you know? Sorry, just thought dumping on this case because it's a lot, and we've done cases before where a mother comes and kills a pedophile, but they are all a little different. And I like to talk about these because what is the right solution, right? Also, just to tack on to what I was saying about I really believe these kids, I mentioned this before. I think that part of the reason Michael was interested in Corinna was I think he planned this. She had 2 kids already that were not his. I think that this was a dark, long-standing plan, and Corinna was taken advantage of in her youth, and then she was also controlled and developed these avoidant behaviors that did not save her children. So here are the factors that the judge weighed out before he tried to balance her sentencing away from just purely life. 1, the judge said that her husband was an old man, 80 years old, and she was his primary caretaker. They said he was extremely vulnerable. 2, they said the mixing of hot sugar was deliberate and it was designed to cause significant physical suffering. Now, those are the ones against her. They also said that she was in a state of distress prior. 1, she had no prior convictions and had never been in trouble before. 2, they said that her actions were out of character. 3, in court, her family and friends attested to her always being friendly and willing to help others, and she was extremely involved in charity work. 4, they also considered that this was not a long, drawn-out plan, which I agree. She learned everything that day. This was not going for weeks and weeks and weeks, and, you know, they were like, should we take the polygraph or should we kill them? Like, no, it was like everything came out of her at once. The last point was when they did the psych evaluation on her, they said that she was in acute stress. And look, if you ever experienced acute stress before, you know what that feels like. It is like, it's literally like a fucking hurricane inside of your head, okay? They said that she was in a state of acute stress during and after, and that she showed significant signs of PTSD from this entire thing. You know, you would think that anytime somebody commits a crime, a murder, especially against their spouse, that they would have some type of PTSD after the murder. Not everybody has that. Corinna had severe PTSD from the day of learning all of this and what she did to her husband. So after weighing everything, the judge came back and he sentenced Corinna to life in prison, but with a minimum of 12 years to be served. This means that after a couple of years, the parole board can evaluate her case, and if she's had good behavior, if they feel like she's reformed, they might let her out. However, if she reoffends, she would be right back there. But personally, I don't think Corinna is going to commit this crime again. This case is actually really interesting and difficult to navigate because on one hand, you might feel like Michael should have had a fair trial and it shouldn't have been so extreme. And then on the other hand, you might feel like, well, she did what she did. She took the law into her hands and she did what she had to do to protect her kids. I'm not sure exactly where you stand. In fact, I actually think that this case is a little too nuanced to just take a hard stance on either side. I think that's actually something we really should start doing online. Like, rather than just right and wrong, like maybe things should be like on a scale or something, you know, like, because my big thought here is that I understand that Corinna was so furious she was going to take matters into her own hands. But what I think about is the daughter who in her 30s finally found her voice to say what had happened to her. The result of it is she never gets justice from her stepfather, and now her other parent is in prison. For children that were abused and they feel like everything is their fault and they don't want to speak up because they don't want to divide the family, this is probably her worst nightmare.